Good morning and welcome to Third Thursday 30. Today we're going to be talking about risk management, a process-based approach to controlling risk. So very excited about this subject. It's near and dear to my heart. I think that risk management is the way we save money, the way we really start driving continual improvement. So if you will, listen with me and let's talk about risk management, how we solve it with a process-based approach. Some of you may remember that our last session was on risk-based thinking. Now, risk-based thinking is it's not only identifying the risk, but it's mitigating the risk. Anytime you find a risk, you should always find a way to mitigate it if it's significant enough risk. Let's talk today about just that risk management process. Risk management is 3 steps. It really is that simple. The 3 steps are identify the risk, assess the current situation, and mitigate by priority. The first way we identify risk is we've got to understand the types of risk there are. There's organizational risk, there's process risk, and there is risk anytime you make significant changes. So the first thing in assessing risk is what are we currently doing to address that risk. So as we've identified the risk, now we're talking about how we're going to assess that risk. So what are you currently doing to address that risk? How effective are those countermeasures that you've put in place? And are there any further actions needed to address this risk? ISO 9001:2015 requires in clause 6.1 that you determine your risk, identify your risk, uses exactly those words, by looking at the issues to the organization stated in clause 4.1 and the needs of interested parties. So clause 6.1 feeds from clause 4.1 and 4.2. Clause 6.2, I don't think it's an accident. It follows 6.1. So right after you've found your risk, you've assessed your risk, the next thing that you have to do is set your objectives. That to me is a revelation that our objectives come after we think about what the risks are to our organization. So this is just a Deborah saying, you can't set the objectives unless you know the risk. There's a reason that 6.2 follows 6.1. We used to see this pyramid diagram hierarchy of a management system. That went away in the new version, the recently released 10,013, describing the document management system of a management system, the document management system of a management system. It was replaced with a hierarchy for risk. High, medium, and low risk, where you prioritize what you're going to do based on what the priority is of the risk that are not totally controlled. In other words, don't work on, if you identify a risk and you assess it and you know that risk has not only been mitigated, it has not reoccurred, it hasn't occurred, it's not going to occur. That's a low risk now. But if you've got a risk that is still present, it hasn't been mitigated, it's very important, then it needs to become part of your prioritization that you're working on as objectives. That should be a revelation to you too. It was a revelation to me. So process approach to risk management is how you fix the risk identified and prioritized in Clause 6. A moment about process approach. So the process approach is, what are the inputs? What steps do we perform on those inputs to create outputs? Now, that's a simplified version of the process approach, but you get the idea. The part of the process approach that concerns us right now is the outputs from one process, the risk that we're going to address are how we address them are steps in the process. Okay? So the way you mitigate a risk is you put a step in a process. Remember, we talked about you identify the risk, you assess the risk, and then you decide, do we need to do something else? And if you do need to do something else, what are you going to do? So as you do that something else, it has to become a step in your process, or it doesn't exist in your management system. Always make sure that your steps to mitigate risk are in your processes. Another comment about the process approach: outputs from one process are always the inputs to another. Mitigation countermeasures, like I just said to you, and I'm emphasizing so much, should be steps in the process. The required countermeasures to address risk based on practices, the standards, are always in Clause 7 and 8. So those are also things to requirements, but their requirements are to address certain risk. Process approach is plan, do, check, act. Your planning was done in Clause 4, 5, and 6, where you took Clause 4 to feed Clause 6 to determine your risk. It takes leadership to do this, and that's Clause 5. The doing is Clause 7 and 8, which is where you're going to see some of those tools built into the standard to help you to mitigate risk. The shalls are there to mitigate a risk. Okay? So, but you may have other risk that the standard didn't cover. So you're going to cover those shalls in 7 and 8 in your process steps also, and then add any steps needed to address risk. Clause 9 is how you monitor and measure, you check. Clause 10 is acting, making improvement occur. Check. Determine what you must monitor and measure to control the risk. You did this when you assessed your risk and you prioritized them. You thought of the tools you would need to monitor, measure, and control risk. Make them steps in the process so that you know that they're going to occur. Giving you here an example of a way that I think when I'm assessing risk. I use that first column to identify my risk. I relate it to the type of risk it is. Is it an organizational risk coming from 4.1 and 4.2? Or is it a process risk that I identify as part of 4.4? Or is it a risk when changes occur? And how will I know when those changes occur? How will I address them? The next column is the process column. I'm just reminding myself, telling myself which process I'm in. The risk, what I know the risk is occurring. The current measures that I'm using to address them. The risk. And then, is that an effective tool that I'm currently using? Or do I need to do something else? And if I need to do something else, what priority is it? I did that for the quality management system, but then if you will look at it, there's also a compliance management system where we start over with what are our processes, what are our risks, countermeasures, assess effectiveness. I could have up here, instead of compliance management system, I might have ISO 45001, health and safety, or I could have environmental. As you can see with this table, it could go on and on based on the management system. I am liking to combine it into the compliance management system strictly because of that wonderful new standard we have that came out May 31st, 2021, ISO 37301, that is the compliance management standard that combines all compliance requirements into one standard. Just in summary, let's remember that there are 3 steps. It is simple. You identify the risk, you assess your current situation, and then you mitigate based on priority. Those controls or mitigations or steps that you put in the process map so you make sure that they occur, because we're going to audit to the process maps. It's that simple. It's just that simple. It's that simple. Thank you so much for listening this morning. Join us. Join us every third Thursday. We go at 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. There's 2 sessions. The 6 a.m. session, bright and early for those who are in that time zone. And then 6 p.m. These are Eastern Standard Time. And 6 p.m. is for those others who couldn't reach us at 6 a.m. Internal Auditor Basics is a course that's going to be coming up this fall. We're planning to do it remote, and the reason we want to do it remote is we want to stretch this Internal Auditor Basics course over several weeks and allow you to do the internal auditing, and come back to class. So it's going to be a fun class. Let me know if you're interested. Just drop me an email. There's always resources on our website, www.ce-q.com. We've got free templates. We've got management review forms, corrective action forms, and more. There's webinars. So go to our website. If there is something that you're hunting, we want to be your resource for making your management system simple. If you have some questions, let me know. I'm always available to help you. Looking forward to working with you again in the future. Look forward to seeing you again on our next Thursday 30.